Canada will send an additional $50 million in humanitarian aid to help Palestinians in Gaza and neighboring regions.
And the focus of my participation was also about addressing the humanitarian issue in Gaza. We welcome the fact that aid was able to enter Gaza. Of course, we need to see more.
The announcement this weekend came as 20 flatbed trucks flying white flags entered Gaza via the southern border with Egypt on Saturday. In those trucks, a long-awaited delivery of humanitarian aid, food, water, and medical supplies. Not included, however, was fuel. And with more than 150 other trucks waiting at the border for another green light, humanitarian groups warn that the aid they received is only a small fraction of what is needed. Samer Abdeljaber oversees operations in Gaza with the World Food Program. He joins us now from Jerusalem. Samer, it's good to speak with you again.
Thanks, David, and good to speak to you again.
We're starting to see some aid get in, but it's dozens of trucks when hundreds are needed. What are your people on the ground inside Gaza telling you about the situation right now?
I think the situation is not improving, David. Like I was telling you earlier, it's, of course, a welcome first step that we managed to get some convoys into Gaza, but it's just like a drop in the ocean. I think there's more needed. And, of course, we're seeing people just exhausted from being displaced, sharing thousands sharing one toilets in the shelters. So the situation is now really tough, and it's getting into the mental health of people as well, not just the physical and diet and food and water issues.
When we last spoke, you had aid ready to go in at both ends of Gaza, at both of the entrances. Obviously, things are only moving in through the Egyptian side at Rafah. How much of your aid were you able to get into the city?
So we were able to enter to only 3 trucks, which is enough to feed 200,000 people for one day. We have basically around 900 metric tons of food, which means 43 trucks at the borders waiting to enter. But it's a slow process, and that's why we're trying to advocate that we need it. It's a great initiative, first step that we're getting a couple of trucks in, but we need to go at scale at the moment. If I want to give you just a comparison, what have entered now so far in any given day in the last 3 days is equivalent to 3% of what would have entered before the conflict.
3% over a 3-day period, or 3% on a daily basis, Samer?
On a daily basis.
On a daily basis. So that just shows you the gap in need versus what's available. And a lot of the holdup has been Israel's security concerns and wanting inspections of trucks to make sure there's no weapons or military aid that Hamas could use, and then concern about it being diverted once it got inside. What's your understanding of how those concerns are being dealt with?
I think the Egyptians and the Israelis have agreed on a mechanism that allows the key commodities to go in, which is food, water, and health medicine. So the first day it was a direct convoy, but from the second day it went through the scanning process. And of course, there is capacities to increase, and instead of just going with 20 trucks, there is capacities to increase it to more, which allows more aid to get into Gaza. So we're working with all stakeholders and trying to address all the different challenges and obstacles to make sure that it's a smoother process moving forward.
So there has been a lot of talk from people on the ground there and from diplomats and the political leadership of various countries of some optimism for there to be a continuous flow of aid going in. What's your sense from your people there on how likely that is and how soon something like that could happen?
I think we're all hoping that it will be continuous and steady. So because the needs are growing, just to give you another figure, 1.4 million people are displaced at the moment, David, and almost 500,000 of them are in shelters. Those shelters were originally built as schools. In a classroom, you have 70 people sleeping every day. So that tells you how much the needs are and how important to make sure that it's steady flow of goods. And of course, if we maintain with the current scale of 20 trucks a day, that's not going to be enough at all. And it's going to create a backlog across the borders as well.
When we spoke last week, you told us about how you're getting electronic vouchers to people so they can buy food from vendors who are part of World Food programs, and also talked about various bakeries. The number had been dramatically reduced when we last spoke. What's your sense of that situation inside Gaza right now? Is there food to buy, and are those bakeries able to bake anything at this point?
So many of the bakeries have actually closed. The ones that we've contracted with have scaled down dramatically. Even I think when we talked last time, it was around 5 that were still operational. Now it's even less because they're struggling. So we're trying to see how we support them on basically any given day to make sure that their issues are addressed, whether it's by fuel or by wheat flour, to make sure that we are able to take that bread and source it to the shelters. But again, like I was telling you, I think when we talked last time, there were 260,000 people in shelters. Now it's almost 500,000. And the maximum we're able to source in terms of bread is around 220,000 with reduced ration. So that tells you how really difficult the situation is. We're trying now to explore and work with partners for healthy kitchens and hot meals in the shelters and scale that up, because we need to look at it on the long run and not just on a day-by-day basis.
One of the concerns people have is access to electricity. A lot of people rely on generators. A lot of hospitals rely on generators to run things like incubators and ventilators and sort of critical life-saving equipment. And even with the flow of this aid, Samer, no fuel is getting in. How critical is it that fuel be allowed in, or is that simply a non-starter because of the security concerns that Israel has about gasoline helping Hamas?
Look, fuel is important for all the sectors. So definitely for the health sector, it is required for hospitals. But I can talk on something related to our mandate is that in WFP, bakeries need it. The mills need it to actually produce wheat flour. Even the transportation that are happening at the borders for the truck, those trucks to do the transshipments and the back-to-back and move things to the warehouses, they need fuel. So, and unfortunately, the fuel situation is alarming, at least from a humanitarian perspective, because there's not enough that allows us to maintain that logistical operation that is required inside Gaza. So, and of course, if you asked the question about the electronic vouchers, the shops are running out of electricity, of course. Some of them have solar panels, and that's why we're able yet to work with them. But soon, I think this is not something sustainable if they can't maintain it. And that's why they need to also go back into proper electricity to be able to sustain that systems. They're not able to restock and refill the shops, simply because the infrastructure is not supporting it. Like I said, the roads are affected, but also fuel. So wholesalers are not able to replenish at the retailers level.
So, Samer, just as a final point, I know the urgent focus is on getting aid into Gaza right now and coming up with, Egypt and Israel coming up with an acceptable inspections system that allows for that aid to flow in. But on that other concern about what happens to the aid once it gets inside Gaza and the possibility of things being diverted to Hamas and taken by Hamas and away from the citizens that you're sending the aid in for, how can that be monitored and policed when nobody can really go in there and the place is an active theater of war?
Yeah, look, I think the last word you said is really important. We're operating in a time of war, and it's really, really a complex conditions that we are operating in. And imagine doing that with no proper connectivity for internet or even mobile services. It's not functioning. So before the conflict, we had 100% assurance on the delivery of our assistance. And that's why we're advocating we need fuel, we need the communication systems to function so that we can actually design the right projects that allows us to make sure that there is no diversion at all to the wrong hands. At the moment, with the small scale of what we're providing, we're going into the shelters. Those are UN managed shelters, and therefore it gives us the assurance that there's no diversion outside the shelters. But going to communities, and that's why we're working now on risk assessments. We're trying to contract the right partners so that we can, and monitors, of course, our own staff to make sure that there is no issues related to diversion. That is a priority for us.
Samer Abdeljaber with the World Food Program, thank you again for your time today, sir.
Thank you very much, David.